I'm in a police car and I go to jail. I've been fortunate to have driven a lot of exciting cars. I've driven a Lamborghini at 200 miles an hour before. I've done some track days. I've driven a McLaren. I've driven a Ferrari 458. My Corvette was certainly not in the caliber of those cars, but it was comfortable and it was roomy and it had room in the back and rode fairly plush, I guess, for a sports car. My only complaint with it maybe would be that on the edge of its handling, I was able to hang the tail out on a 458 Ferrari once, and it was just the most graceful, organic. It just felt like the tire contact patches were like extensions of my feet and my hands, and it was just the most controllable. You could just steer it and slide it exactly where you wanted to go. It just felt so organic, and the Corvette was not like that. The Corvette would hang on and hang on, hang on, and then at the last second, it would just let go and be all over the place, and if you spun it out, it would be convinced it was caught in an accident, and the hazard lights would come on, it wouldn't restart, and you'd be sitting in the middle of Georgia 400 very embarrassingly after having done a unsuccessful power slide out into Georgia 400, for example. But anyway, I enjoy driving this car. I enjoy driving it fast whenever I could, but for legal purposes, I didn't unless it was somewhere generally safe. But every now and then you have that reason. Maybe you're driving somebody to the hospital or you've got some other important thing going on that you feel that somehow the police are going to understand that it's okay to drive fast. And I was having one of those days. I was near where I lived at the time, and late at night, I would hear somebody in some sort of loud car just tearing up and down this relatively long country road near there. And it was it was a V8, maybe Ford Coyote motor or something. Sounded great, but just late at night, and I liked it. I'm a car guy. It sounded great, but presumably the other neighbors didn't. I was out in the Corvette one day and I got a call. I needed to go help a friend. And at the time it was an emergency for him and I needed to go. So I just hit it, and I wasn't maxing this car out by any means, but I'm flying down this road and apparently somebody who had heard the other guy knew a friend. There was this huge police speed trap set up, I guess, for that guy, and I blew right through it. I was not going as fast at this point as I had been going a mile or two before, but it was still plenty fast. According to the paperwork, it was 137 and a 50. And because it was a country road, but they had built some new subdivisions and things like that, they considered it a residential area. So needless to say, I was rapidly handcuffed, drug out the window, put on the hood of the car. They were not happy. My explanation that it was for a medical emergency from a friend didn't hold any water. Maybe, when you look like me, I don't know, I just didn't look like the kind of guy that would be doing an altruistic thing for a friend at 137 miles an hour. And again, it was like 7:30 on a Tuesday night. It was in the wintertime. It wasn't like, 2 a.m. with strippers hanging out of the roof or anything. But regardless, they weren't impressed. I'm in a police car and I go to jail. I ended up getting charged with super speeder and reckless driving. Somebody who has talked his way out of many tickets and many pullovers. I knew this one was a little more serious. I asked some friends. I got a recommendation for a good lawyer, gave him a call. He said, well, we'll see what we can do. When we first sat down and looked at the charges, the thing the lawyer noticed immediately, he said, well, there were no drugs, no alcohol. I'd blown a 0 on the breathalyzer. So the only thing that made it reckless driving was the speed. Well, they'd already charged me with super speeder, so you can't really charge me for the same thing twice. So he said, so here's a plan. He said, let's do the minimum the minimum sentence for reckless driving in Georgia at that time was 20 hours of community service, a victims awareness class, a defensive driving course, and then possibly some jail time and, of course, a fine. So his idea was, let's go ahead and just voluntarily do those things, take the classes, do the community service, and then when we go to court, we'll say to the judge, look, he's already done this part, let him go on the reckless driving, then we'll just stick you with the super speeder. Now, super speeder was not good either. That was my insurance was going to have a comma in it for the rest of my life, and I might even lose my license for a year. It was not good, but it was better than the 90 days in jail for reckless driving and the 2-year suspension on my license. So we do that. So I pick one of these classes and I go to it. It's a bunch of people who've gotten DUIs and they're all like, well, what did you do? What did you blow? And I'm like, nothing. I was just there for speeding. So I was, not the cool guy in the DUI class, and also watching a bunch of stories about drinking and driving when I wasn't drinking and driving, but whatever. I did the defensive driving course with a bunch of teenagers, and again, I was 35 at the time, but so I just looked like some old guy in there. And again, they're, find it very amusing that I'm in there with a bunch of teenagers. And of course, then they thought my story was cool because I'd actually been arrested. So I do those classes, and it comes time for my community service. And I did a little Googling, and I figured out who my judge would be on this. It was kind of a very small town, by the way. And so I find out who my judge is going to be, and I look her up, and I find out she's very active in the community theater there. And being an artist, I thought, hey, I can spin this. So I contacted them. And of course, with community service, for any of you who've never been on community service, you have to do a certain number of hours for some nonprofit. You can work for Goodwill or the animal shelter or something like that. Well, the community theater where this judge liked to act was a nonprofit. So I contacted them and told them the situation and asked what I could do. And they said, well, sure, we've got a play coming up. If you could do the playbill and the mailer and a poster, then sure, that sounds great. So, okay. So I did something really nice, and I actually kind of, looked her up on Facebook, did a few things to kind of, figure out, what she was into. And so I just did an appealing playbill and all that kind of stuff. I had a little section you could sort of highlight different people, and I made her one of the people. And anyway, so I did all this. We go to court. And I'm hopeful, I'm excited, because I feel like I've got a little ace in the hole here to kind of, kiss up to this judge a bit. She was a relatively young lady, had a very, very southern voice, talked very sweetly, but yet said some of the most sinister things. There was a fellow in front of me who had been charged with possession of something like that, of some sort, and just very sweetly, she just said, well, Mr. Johnson, as this is your third offense, you are going to spend the next 1 year in our jail. I hope you have a wonderful stay. And I'm thinking, oh, crap. The next gentleman up was a gentleman from another country who had been here, I guess, inappropriately. And same thing. He had gotten just some minor offense for a taillight out or something like that. And she just said, Mr. Juarez, we have now notified the authorities and you will be shipped back to the country from whence you came. I'm just thinking like, wow, this is not looking good. For whatever reason, they were trying, it was like two different hearings. There was like one for the reckless driving. Then I was going to have another one for the super speeder. So this is the one for the reckless driving. We go up to talk. My lawyer, of course, tells, the situation. He was helping a friend, wasn't doing anything crazy. And he's already done the minimum sentence for the reckless driving. He took this class, here's a certificate. He took this other class, here's a certificate, and he did his community service. And she said, well, what did you do your community service for? And I had my portfolio right there. And I said, well, I love the theater, and I was excited to see that they were on the list. So I created this playbill right here. And her face lit up. She said, I was in that play. And I was like, really? She said, yes. And that's me right there on the little actor bed. I said, oh, wow, that is you. What a delight. Well, I had such a good time doing it. I saw your play. It was so fantastic. She said, well, that's just so delightful. Thank you so much. That's framed on my wall at home. And I'm thinking, yes. Understandably, she was very kind, and she just waved the wand, and the reckless driving went away. And then I was given another court date for the super speeder. And, super speeder's still a bad thing, but thanks to a little bit of research and a little bit of guile, I made the reckless driving go away. I came back in a couple of weeks, and this is now the bit of the trial hearing, whatever, for the super speeder. This day was not going well at all. The prosecutor in the county there was this really angry guy. I mean, he was just dishing everything out. I think this county at the time had a kind of a bad reputation for some, crystal meth, a lot of drug use there. And I think he was on this sort of crusade. I'm going to clean up crime. I'm just going to give everybody the maximum sentence I can. And he was just angry. At one point, we had to actually stop court because he got so mad at somebody. He just swept a whole thing of folders off a table and was just ranting and screaming. And I'm thinking like, oh my God, this guy's going to nail me. It comes to my turn, and he gets up there, and he had gotten confused as to where I was. He thought I was actually in like some sort of residential street or something, like I was blowing through a playground or something. So he was yelling about, my license. He's going to make sure I go to jail. Whatever I gained getting out of the reckless driving was now suddenly going downhill. Again, this is tiny little town, tiny little courtroom, just sort of had this Dukes of Hazzard kind of flair to it, and I was really, really getting nervous. The moment came up for him to give me the super speeder, and he's kind of going through his books, and he's flipping paper and just angrily rifling through things, and he stomps out at one point, and we're all just kind of sitting there, and he comes stomping back in again. He shovels through his paperwork a little bit, and he motions to my attorney, my lawyer goes up, and they leave the room. And I'm thinking, like, man, this can't be good. In just a couple of minutes, my attorney comes back right from another door, comes over my shoulder and taps me on the shoulder, and he said, "You got to go with me on this. I need you to sign this." And I look, and it's an admission of guilt form, but there's nothing written on what I did. And I was like, I don't know about this. He's like, "This is what you paid me for. I can make this go away, but you've got to sign this." Okay. So I sign it, and he leaves. And I sit there for 10 minutes thinking, like, what did I just sign? This is where you trust your lawyer, but what did I just sign my admission of guilt to? My lawyer comes back in a couple of minutes. He sits down and he says, "You've got a 65 and a 50. You need to pay the fine on the way out." And I was like, I'm pretty sure I was going about 87 miles an hour faster than that, like almost triple the speed limit. He's like, "You're a lucky guy. Come with me." So we go to the window. I paid the fine for 65 and a 50. We go outside, and I'm like, "What just happened?" And he said, "Well, you got lucky for the county you got busted in." He said, "The prosecutor there is going to be running for some office soon. He did not have the paperwork for super speeder, and he did not want to tell the judge that he came to court without the proper paperwork. He left to go get a copy of it or print it out, but they're having some sort of bake sale somewhere in the department, and they've got the printer. Like, there's only one printer, and it was being used to run flyers for a bake sale. He couldn't print off the super speeder paperwork, and 65 and a 50, the 15 over, that was the biggest thing he could charge you with the paperwork he had." And I was like, I am a lucky guy. So I did have to pay a fine. I had to pay my attorney, but thanks to a bake sale and a flyer for a small town play, I did not have to go to jail.
We'd like to thank the Ticket Clinic for supporting this month of VinWiki Car Stories. If you get a ticket, no matter where it is, it can have huge impacts on your driver's license, your points, and your insurance. So be sure to call the Ticket Clinic next time you get a ticket anywhere in the country. They're a national law firm with representatives everywhere, and they can help you fight a ticket no matter where it happens. It's very important to save a lot of long-term costs to deal with it the right way now. So be sure to contact them at the link in the description below and thank them for their support of VinWiki.